you have a button that's called reaction. It's a smiley face with a plus. And if you click on it, you have two buttons. One is this one, and the other one is that one. And you are able to use it. You can use it during the training of Michelle. So if you have a question, you can, for example, ask this one. Or if you like something, you say this one. Hugging is not allowed in this training for social distancing reasons, but give your compliments with a big tongue. Good. The training is also recorded. Virtual. Louis say virtual hugs. Yes, you can if you really need to. I have to ask first, Michelle, do you want to receive virtual hugs?
Sure. I can do there's as far as we can.
Yes, Louise, you can do that. Good. 23, that's nice. And Barbara Walters is going for a next level, a virtual group hug. Barbara, how do you do that? Tell me, inspire me. I don't see you. But anyway, oh, there, she's showing right now. Yeah, like this, you say, like this. Yeah, like this. So we grab, or maybe like this, the two hands, and then yes. You see, with so many things to practice and to learn now. Good, Michelle. How is the situation?
We got 25 participants in so far.
Okay, good. And I guess the stream is drained out. So we can start?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you an introduction. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Peter van der Velde, and project leader of this JCI Change Your Game 2020. Before we start, some house rules of this webinar. First, the cameras can stay on. Secondly, questions can be written in the chats during the speaking time, and you can use the reaction buttons, which I explained just before. If you have any technical failure during this webinar, do not worry. You can just try to use the same link, and Michelle will log you in again. This project is founded as a tool for our members to deal with change. Maybe like you or maybe your business were hit by lockdown. What is certain is that the crisis will have more and more a gigantic impact on our game we were playing. So it's time for a new one. And with this project, we give you confidence that change can bring a positive narrative if we create that change today. Who are we? Well, JCI is an international NGO with more than 200,000 members worldwide. The organization provides development opportunities to 18-40-year-olds in business, community, internationalism, and trainings like this project JCI Change Your Game 2020. JCs are trained in our organization to deal with change and to become leaders in the world we live in today. Therefore, I invited Ms. Michelle McGrann, and she is a proud member of JCI USA and 2020 JCI Skills Development Chair and founding member of Coeus Creative Group. And especially for the JCI Change Your Game project, she is willing to give a trainer course to offline trainers, want to go online, or the ones who already made their first steps but still have lots of questions. She will share best practices on how to make online training effective and engaging. As a highly experienced trainer and coach, Michelle has recently managed the transition of in-person learning events to the online environment for multiple non-profit or for-profit organizations. She will be sharing what she has learned through this process, as well as immediately usable skills and strategies we can use to create better online training events. May I present you Michelle McGrann, How to Make Online an Engaging Training. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. For me, it's afternoon. I know for many of you, it may be evening, but I really appreciate you taking the time. In both of my roles as a training professional, as well as Skills Development Chair for JCI this year, the training in and of itself is very important to me, and the skill sets that we are able to develop allow us to do a better job of, educating our participants and passing knowledge on, which is really what it's all about. So the fact that each one of you have signed on today and have committed to do that, I really appreciate that. So we'll go ahead and get started, and I will start by sharing my PowerPoint here. Can everybody see the screen share? Just making sure if you put a thumbs up, perfect. So as you said, this is about making your online trainings more engaging, because as we move from an in-person environment to an online environment, things are very different. So if you want to go ahead and take a minute to introduce yourself on the chat, just, your name, where you're from, and whether or not, you've participated in online training. So I'll give you a second to feel free to put stuff in the chat there. Excellent. Welcome, Stephen. Welcome, Kelly. Getting a couple more in. Hello, Peter. Sabata, Guy. Yep. So everybody coming in. Perfect. So as you can see from the chat, a lot of us have participated in online trainings, and many of us have also trained them. And as you're probably aware, there are some significant differences between online training and in-person training. So first, it's important to cover that before we talk about engagement in general, because without really understanding the context or the differences, it makes it more difficult to figure out how to create those levels. So first of all, I'm going to launch a poll here. Take a minute, just give your feedback. How many times have you trained in the new online environment? More than 10 times? 1 to 3? Getting there. Okay. So 83% of you gave feedback, and it looks like the highest number is 1 to 3 times, followed by never, and then 6 to 10. So that tells me that we have a wide range of online training experience in this group. So we're going to go ahead and cover information that's valuable to people both who've never done this, as well as some more advanced things for those of you who have trained 6 to 10 times or more than 10 times. I want to make sure that the information is usable for each and every one of you. So how does online training differ from in-person training? First of all, in-person training, you have a captive audience. Everybody's in the same room. They're kind of forced to look at you, whether it be social pressure or not, but they're captive there. it's easier to build relationships in person as well. Peter and I were talking about this before the meeting, that when you are in person, you are picking up on unconsciously body language, verbal cues, and there are certain things that we do just naturally, building rapport. And that is more difficult in an online environment because you can't see people to the same level. It's also easier to engage with the audience, and that's going to be really the focus of this training, is how do you continue engagement online. And it allows for more experiential or kinesthetic activities that require movement or interaction with other people. The inverse on online is that a lot of times you have a distracted audience. I'm sure that most of us have been guilty of signing into an online environment of some sort and turning the camera off and answering emails or having something else go on in the background. Even if you haven't done that, a lot of times you're in your home and you may have significant others or roommates or pets, or just the pressure of, oh, I need to be doing chores instead, that make it so that it's far harder for you to focus as much. So in online training, your audience is very often a distracted audience, which comes with its own problems and difficulties. Next, it's more difficult to build relationships, exactly what I said before, in terms of not being able to see somebody, as well as just feeling physically distant. However, online training does have some benefits. You have the ability to leverage technology in ways that you don't necessarily have available to you in an in-person environment. Everyone is already in front of their computer and on an internet connection, which gives you some different tools and methods that you can use that we're going to cover more in depth. It also offers more flexibility. It would be far more difficult, to have a training even like this one in person, where we have people from all over the world participating together. We also didn't need to book a location or provide a meal or figure out those logistical difficulties. And so online training, therefore, can be far more flexible. It's also convenient and cost-effective for just those reasons. So keeping this in mind, when we talk about online training, the thing that we always need to remember, the key to online training, is to be intentional. You continually need to ask yourself, how will my participants interact with the content, right? This is an important thing when we're talking about in-person training as well. However, it becomes far more important in the online environment because your participants' interaction with the content is all that they have at this point, right? It's a lot easier to promote interaction in person. So engagement is all about your audience's experience. It's the key. That's what engagement really means. It's how they're interacting. And so the audience always needs to be central in your mind. And you need to be able to adapt yourself to your audience's needs. So you need to first, how do we do this, right? First, you need to figure out who your target audience is. Are you looking for people who are not well-versed in the topic, that they're novices, or that it's new to them and you're doing more of an introduction? Or are you looking at a highly competent audience who's been dealing with this topic for a very long time and you can go more in depth? Understanding who your target audience is allows you to target and align your content with what they're expecting and what they need, as well as define your engagement activities to align with that as well. So for example, if you're doing a project management training and one of your engagement activities is that you have them fill out a very complex Gantt chart, but your audience doesn't even really know what project management is, they will become disengaged from your engagement activity because it's at a level that they don't understand. So you really need to identify who your target audience is, and you can do that in a couple of ways. First of all, you can do it with online registration questions. So before the training even starts, set up an online registration form where you're asking your participants a few questions. You can ask them who they are and get an idea of demographics. You can ask them what is their background experience? What profession or career are they coming from? Where are they located? What time zone? Because even here, for me, it's the middle of the afternoon. It's right after lunch. For many of you, this is your end of day, and that you have different energy levels, which can factor into engagement as well. But where did they hear about the training is another important one, because that can give you some insight as to whether your marketing is working well, or if they all heard about it from a very specific Facebook group. That gives you insight as to maybe shared interests or experience at that level as well. And then finally ask them why they're participating. What are they looking to get out of it? And that can become your goal setting or your objective for designing and engaging training. It's important to recognize where your audience is coming from and align the content and the level to their experience, because if it's too simplistic, you lose people. They get bored, they disengage. That's when they, go back to typing their emails. But the alternative is also the same. If it's too above your audience's level, same thing, they tune out. It's too complicated, it's hard to pay attention. So you're trying to align that sweet spot right in the middle. Online registration questions are a good way that can let you know in advance so you can adapt your presentation or activities. Now, sometimes that's not an option, right? Like you're doing a training for someone else, you don't have access to the online registration questions, or maybe you don't have a format for doing that, it's open to the public. There are other ways that once you're in the session to do the same thing. And so things like, I'm jumping around too much. Things like the questions that I asked you in your introduction chat, your name, where you're from, and whether how much you've done online training before, gives me a small glimpse as to, okay, this is how experienced my audience is. Here's what time it is where my audience is at. How tired are they, right? That's the same sort of thing that you can do within. Same with the polling, right? That tells me that I have a mix of experience levels. And so that may change the way I explain something or the way I run my engagement activities. The other thing that can have an impact on your ability to do engagement activities is the size of your audience. So small audiences like this are set up a lot in a meeting format. So we're using Zoom as our platform of choice. And there are certain tools that are available in the meeting function of Zoom that are not available in the webinar function. However, large audiences, sometimes you need to be able to limit participation or the control that your audience has. And so you'd want a webinar feature instead. There are pros and cons to both. And we're going to talk about some of specifically the tools that exist on the platform and how you utilize them. But the size of your audience can determine the type of engagement that you're able to do, simply because that's what you can manage as a trainer. So small audiences, it's a lot easier to have open discussions, or you can do, ask people to answer in the chat, and you actually have a chance of being able to read through all of them while you're going, right? If we had 200, you'd spend 15, 20 minutes reading all the chat messages. That's not really achievable. But in a large audience, the webinar feature, you don't, many times participants are not able to just ask questions organically, and they can't talk to each other, right? So that has an impact on the type of engagement you're going to get. Pro tip, if you've not done online training before, start small. It's much easier to manage a smaller group of participants than it is large. If you are going to have a large audience, get help. Have somebody else signed on to the same account who's able to manage the chat for you or something like that, because being responsive also improves engagement, and if there's too many participants, you can't be as responsive. Next is making sure that you have a platform that you understand how to use. We've all been in situations where we've seen things go weird, basically, because somebody didn't necessarily know all the functions of their platform. And the ability, knowing your platform well, allows you to better manage participants in chats and things like that, but it also lets you know what internal tools that you have and how you can leverage them to improve engagement. So we're in Zoom, we're in the meeting function, which means that I know that I have the ability to use Whiteboard, I have the ability to use Annotation, I can do breakout rooms, I can do polling, and I can also generally, because of the size of the audience, we may be able to do open discussion, especially if there's a particular question. I know that because I know my platform. Other meetings have different, like meeting softwares and platforms have different tools. And so really understanding what's available will tell you how to leverage it. Okay, so that was the background. That's online training, that's the context. But what are we really here for? We're here to figure out ways to make online training more engaging. And so there are two functions to building engagement, both within the presentation itself and the technology on that level, but then also with the trainers themselves. And we're going to talk about both. So first up, tools, because you can't really understand your method until you know what tools are available to you. First of all, the very simple one is your PowerPoint or slide deck, right? I use PowerPoint, that's easier for me. It's pretty consistent across the world, but there are other programs that you can use to create slide decks. The first thing in order to increase engagement is make sure that you have more slides, but you have less words on slides. It is hard for a participant to pay attention to you if they're spending the whole time reading, right? I will put a caveat. If you are training in a place in which you know that English is a second language and your slides are in English, maybe then you should put more words. If your slides are in French and French is a second language, maybe you need to put more words on it so that because that sometimes reading can help a little bit more. But generally, best practice, not a wall of text, less words, more slides. Also, lots of images. Use animation for bullet points. So you may have seen it earlier in the presentation when we were comparing and contrasting online and in-person training. That slide had kind of a lot of text on it. But animating the bullet points forces the audience to pay attention as each one appears, right? There's a certain level of psychology, the anticipation of, okay, what's next, right? And so people start focusing on that slide. I will say use this sparingly, have it appear at the point that I've seen some people get animation crazy and things are zooming from every corner of the slide and it's very distracting. We don't necessarily want to do that, but animation for bullet points is one way to have more text, but keep people engaged with the slide. Make sure that they're clean and easy to read. So these slides, as you can see, have a very large central image, very little text on the title that just kind of serves as a reminder of what the concept is. It also allows you to, it's more visually attractive, it's not too busy. And it puts the focus on the image in a lot of these cases. And when we use images, we try to focus on using images that act as a mental reminder for the concept for the audience, and that'll improve your retention. It'll also improve the engagement level. So those are just some quick tips for your PowerPoint slides. If you're going to have a very PowerPoint slide heavy training. Next are internal engagement tools, and I call them internal because they're related to the platform in which you're using them. So in this case, we're going to really focus on Zoom, but many Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, many of these have a lot of these similar tools, although they may be named differently. So first of all, you have chat, right? And we use that at the beginning of this training itself. This is a way in which participants can talk to one another. They can talk to everybody. You can send notifications out to the group of everyone. So the entire training together. So I can, say, hi, everyone, and send a chat to the whole group. You could ask for discussion questions here. You can have sidebar conversations or have your participants helping one another. So for example, in this training, if we had a question that was very specific to how do I handle this situation, and it came from somebody who is less experienced, other more experienced trainers may be able to give feedback as well. And then it sort of becomes a group discussion or a group facilitation of the information, as opposed to just the trainer unidirectionally giving information, right? We're going to talk some methods about ways to use chat for engagement, but this is great to throw out discussion-based questions. You can also put resources in the chat. So, if you are referencing a specific study, you can put a link to the study for future readings or whatever, providing more in-depth engagement for your participants to really wrap themselves around the topic you're talking about. So almost every meeting software has some form of chat, as well as webinars. Next is reactions. So Peter kind of covered this at the beginning too, is that if there's any, if you're going along and you have questions, feel free to use the reaction and it'll pop up in the participant list. This is a good way for you to get almost, it doesn't replace, but it helps with some of that non-verbal communication or feedback that you miss in an online environment. People can put a smiley face, they can put a sad face. If you look in the participant, if you open the participant place box, yes, that's the word I'm looking for, participant box in Zoom, you'll see that there are even more reactions at the bottom, right? Yes, no, go slower, go faster. There's thumbs up, thumbs down, clapping. The coffee cup is usually when somebody's asking to take a break, and then the little clock is I'm taking a minute to myself, or I'm signing off, be right back, sort of thing. And so these are ways that your participants can react to the information and that you're providing, or give feedback. Next is Q&A. So this is a function more available on webinars. So this is not a function that we have in this particular meeting. So it allows participants to put questions, and they're almost in a pinned at the top, so that they don't, very often in chat, somebody will ask a question and then other people are commenting, and all of a sudden it's like you lose it in the stream. Question and answer function in webinar keeps each one separate, and then it allows the meeting organizer, or in that case on a webinar it's called a panelist, to say, I'm going to address that verbally to the camera, or to answer it via text, and then all answers can be seen by the participants. So it's a good way in a large meeting session to keep your questions organized and make sure that you are getting that back and forth with your participants. Next are polls. So you can launch, as you saw, I launched a poll earlier in the meeting. We'll do another one in a bit, but this is a good way to get feedback or discussion, I'm sorry, not really discussion, but answers to questions that have a very finite set of answers, right? Multiple choice. So this could be used, I used it for demographic information here. but if you were to do a training on networking and you wanted to really talk about or preview a concept of what's important in networking, you could say the top 3 traits of important in networking are, and list 5 and see what your audience thinks. You can do it as a post assessment. You finish the module and, you know, kind of review the information that you had before. You can also, if you want to use it as an engagement tool, you can use it and ask sort of sillier questions, right? Just to break up the monotony. Maybe it's not a question that related at all to the content, but you're really, you know, that's providing interaction and information back and forth with your audience. Next is share screen. So right now I'm sharing screen of a PowerPoint, but you have the ability to share screen of any type of web page. So you could do sharing screen can provide opportunities or be a tool for engagement as well, depending on how you use it, whether you want to do a demonstration or if you want to point somebody into further information. The ability to share screen is something that you may not always have in an in-person training that participants can engage with much more in the online environment. We're actually going to practice that in the next session. You can also share documents. And so this is, again, additional resources, worksheets, you know, what are they called? Like manuals, participant takeaways. All of this is much easier to share at very specific sections of your training that can also keep your participants engaged. And then you have the ability to do annotation in Whiteboard. So this is what it's called. These are actually 2 different features in Zoom meetings, but many other meetings have the same, like many other meeting platforms have very similar things. So annotation is the ability to draw on something or on the screen right now. So if I do push annotate here, I can draw on the screen here. I can say, you know, first you go to Google, then you come down here and you type in your search query, and then you push the button, right? I can do a demonstration. I'm sure all of you know how to Google, so it's kind of a silly example, but you know, you can use those tools to showcase very specific stuff on slides. Let me go ahead and
Michelle?
Yep.
Because you are on the host screen, people haven't seen that you can actually, as a host, choose this annotation. So this is a specific tool in Zoom. I think just to frame it a bit.
Yeah, I think that there are certain other meeting platforms that have something similar. I get very confused on which ones because I don't use all of them very often, but I don't know if Click Meeting does. I know Google is introducing new stuff every day. They used to not have the ability to do this, but they do have some sort of shared whiteboard feature. So you really, it comes back to the knowing your platform and knowing what tools and abilities that you have. But yeah, the other thing about annotation is that you all can annotate. If I have my settings set correctly, participants can annotate on the same slide. Yep, so as people are writing is perfect. Exactly. So you could almost even use this as something almost like a scavenger hunt. If you had a slide up that had, you know, a bunch of text or something, and you're like, find the key learning objective, somebody's reading it through, it can be a race to highlight, right? Or draw on it. The other thing is that there is the ability to stamp. If you push stamp, it gives you some elements there that you can choose from. These are great for voting. So if you've ever done an in-person where you have a bunch of options written on a flip chart, and you give everybody like the little round stickers, and you say, vote for your favorite options or your favorite answers or something like that. And people go up and they stick their dots on the sticker, or the stamp feature on Annotate is a good alternative. People can do, yeah, check marks, or X, I hate this one, or heart, I really like this one. Whatever you set as the expectations for the trainer and how you want your participants to engage with this. So, yep, Annotation is a pretty cool tool here. So I'm gonna turn off your annotation. Sorry, guys. Cool. So that's one way in which there's a tool internal to the platform that you can use. The next one that's similar is, oh yeah, here, practice your annotation, which we just did. So the other one is whiteboarding. So let me go here, and I'm actually gonna share a whiteboard with you all instead of my slides for a second. Very similar, only this one is a complete thing and you can draw, and Peter was making fun of me earlier for my inability to draw at all, right? But this is the same thing as like having a whiteboard in the room. You can draw, participants can draw, and you have some of the same features here of the ability to stamp. So you can, add hearts all over the screen or whatever you want to do, right? And so this is a good way in which to do brainstorming, or to draw out a diagram that is a lot easier for someone to understand. It works better if you're better at drawing than I am. Otherwise, you spend more time trying to figure out what is actually on the whiteboard. So yeah, that is the whiteboard there. So I'm gonna get out of there and go back to the PowerPoint real quick. Oh, come on. There we go. So those are two features there. The next one is breakout rooms. So breakout rooms is something that Zoom has, and they were the first platform to have breakout rooms, and one of the reasons why they're one of the more popular ones. But breakout rooms are exactly what they sound like. It gives the trainer the ability to put everybody into smaller group discussions. So I'm going to just show you real quick how this works. You can assign people automatically, or you can assign them manually. And this can be good if you have done demographics beforehand and you know who your participants are. You could be intentional about what breakout rooms that you put people in, or you can do it like I'm going to do randomly right here. So just going to throw you all open in all breakout rooms. Everybody's kind of migrating back. Everybody should be back in 15 seconds. We'll give them just a second. And they're all being pulled back. Awesome. So the nice part about breakout rooms is, as you could see, I could, as host, send a broadcast a message to everybody. So that's a nice way that you could send everybody to a breakout room and then give each one a discussion question to discuss. You can also, you know, say, I'm going to put you in there for 5 minutes. You can broadcast a message telling people how much time is back. At the end, when you say close breakout rooms, it gives everybody about 60 seconds to finish their conversations and come back. So depending on how you leverage that, you can have open discussion, you can have workout teams or, you know, working teams, and many of the same tools are also functioning within breakout rooms. So that's a nice tool that you are able to leverage as well. Then we'll go ahead and talk about external engagement apps. So these are things that are open to you. Let's see. Which membership? Okay, on Zoom meetings, it is the most basic paid one, gives you breakout rooms. At that point, the different levels are just how many people you can have in a training. So to be honest, this is the cheapest, most basic Zoom paid plan right now, which allows for 100 participants and gives you breakout rooms. But yeah, so that's things within the platform that are already, you know, you set up your meeting, you have access to that. But you also have ability to use apps outside of your platform, and that's really what makes a big difference with online training. So there are some third-party engagement apps, Slido, Veevox, Poll Everywhere, Glisser, all of these. You may be familiar with one of them or some of them or all of them. Some of you may have never used any of these before, but many of them are integrated with your phone, and participants are able to, you can poll them, or they can ask questions, right? Each one has different functionality and can be used for different things. But these are some of the more popular ones. The other thing that you can use is Mural. So I'm going to show, this is an alternative. If you are using a platform that does not have the whiteboard or annotation, you can do something like Mural, which I'll show you real quick. Share screen. Oh, desktop. Where's my desktop? Mural. Can you all see Mural? Is it showing my desktop? Okay, sweet. So they have some templates, but if you were to just do a blank one here, all you would do is, okay, I'm logged in. You can send a link to your participants. They don't need an account. And it's basically the ability to, you know, add more sticky notes, add another sticky note, add another sticky note. You can do mind mapping or boarding. This is it's an alternative. It's wanting me to go through the whole like opening thing, but yeah, I'm done with you, Mural. Anyways, it's an alternative to what we traditionally in-person trainings would use as flip chart paper, right? Having everybody put sticky notes or write their own answers. If you all had the link here, and it was not trying to teach me how to use Mural because I already know how to use it. Okay. It would allow you to, and you can drag stuff in. All of you would be able to add to this like a whiteboard or annotation. So I'm going to stop sharing this because it can get overwhelming. But we've actually used it within my company to do group brainstorming, especially when the pandemic first started and we were trying to do strategic planning of what new things were we going to offer, how would we change? And that's actually, the screenshot is a picture of us, of the one that we did internally at our company, where, okay, what type of new coaching opportunities could we do? Here were 3 ideas from members of my team. How could we what new trainings might become more important? Well, design thinking and innovation. How could we be a consultant? We could help people choose the right platform to move their business to an online environment, right? This was a really good tool for that type of mind mapping and brainstorming, all that can be done online. Similar is MindMeister. It's a way of doing mind mapping in an online environment with multiple participants. It's a little bit more structured. Mural, you can just put Post-it notes wherever you want, and it can get a little overwhelming. You can move them around. This already has generally like a preset structure, so it's better for the mind mapping. But again, another free software that you can just get an account to and share a link with your participants. And then finally, the most basic one, but is still useful, is Google Docs. It's as simple as sharing a Google document, a Google Sheet, to collect information and work collaboratively with others. So you can send your participants the link to the Google Sheet or Docs before the meeting, or you can share it within chat. Awesome. And then, so methods. How do you use these things? So we went through all the tools. What are some ways that you can leverage them to build engagement? First of all is your lecture in and of itself. We're going to talk about trainer presence in general, but in a lecture mode, it's very unidirectional. And so you may be at this point asking for your participants to have their camera on and like give you a thumbs up or nod or whatever within a lecture, but not really utilize some of those engagement tools. Lecturing can still be somewhat engaging. It just relies a lot more on trainer performance than using some of the tools. Next is ask and answer. This is a really simple one. Ask a question, have participants answer in the chat, right? So I could say, is everyone with me? Do you understand so far? And everybody could put in the chat, yes, no, you know, whatever you want there. Yes, thanks, Red. Yes, he's with me. But right, you can ask very specific questions. It's a lot easier if you are the sole one writing the chat, that these types of questions are yes or no answers, or short answers. But you can have more, sometimes this is good for people that don't feel comfortable speaking on camera. They may engage more by typing in a chat box. And so a mix of methods is always going to be your best bet in order to reach and make more of your participants comfortable and more engagement. But chat is very obvious engagement tool there. Group discussions. So this is one thing that people have the biggest challenge of figuring out how to do a group discussion, because it's something we don't really think about. We're not very intentional about it in in-person trainings because we all kind of know how to do it, but in the online environment it's harder. So in group discussions, you can ask everybody to have their camera on, and you can use the video feature there to have people participate or be able to look at each other. This is not so much the trainer focus, this is participants sort of engaging with one another. If everybody has the video on, they're seeing each other's faces. You can do the reactions, like I said, that a little bit of, you know, if everybody is with me, put a thumbs up reaction, right? And you can kind of pull your audience there as well. If you can open the mic and have somebody else talk and then ask for reactions to them, and so on. You can also, in a small group, just have an open discussion. Stop sharing the PowerPoint, open up the gallery view and open everyone's mics. This gets harder the more participants that you have. And sometimes, you know, using breakout rooms is a better way to take a large audience and split it up for that small. But exactly, here, breakout rooms, small group discussions can take place there. Now, I gave you all just a taste of what a breakout room is. Generally, you would have one open for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15, depending on whether it's really just to answer one specific question, if it's to have, you know, you want it longer, if it was for a more in-depth discussion, or if you're actually having them work on something like create a presentation together, then you would have it for like 15 minutes. You can also have pair people up and have them chat amongst them, chat back and forth, but that you can only chat with one other person or everyone. So you would have to pair your members up at that point. But small group discussion can happen over chat or in breakout rooms. You can also do demonstrations, right? So this is the video and share screen. So you can show YouTube videos by same as sharing a PowerPoint. The other thing is that you have the ability, at least on Zoom, to share audio. And so instead of it, you know, your participants, it hooks it up through the computer, they can hear just as well instead of, you know, I've seen some people, it's more like they're holding their headphone up to the computer speaker. So you can do video and leverage that. You can also share screen to do a demonstration. This would be if I was to, you know, if I wanted to show you how to find a piece of information. Maybe I open a web browser and I actually go through the steps to demonstrate it. You can also do just a straight video of, I could ask everybody to put their computer on speaker view so that mine becomes larger, and I could actually physically build something or demonstrate a technique to you as an audience. So you still have the ability to interact with your audience or demonstrate things to them using those functions. You can also do read and respond, which is the ability to share documents. So I could send you a really short article. I would not use this for a long piece, or maybe like a worksheet or something, and say, okay, everybody, I sent you the document in the chat. Go ahead and open it. Take just a few minutes to read it over. And then, you know, maybe I give you a discussion question, or I say, you know, what did you get out of it? Go ahead and put that in the chat, right? It's another way you're using outside resources, but you're getting them to really look at a piece of information and respond back, not on a slide. It's a different level of engagement when you send the document to really be read and analyzed than if you put the information just on your screen. There's also the ability to do jigsaw learning. And so some of you may be familiar with this concept if you've taken JCI Facilitator or anything. The concept is something that many of us are familiar with. The name, hit or miss. So jigsaw learning is when you take something, a piece of information that's more complicated, and you give small groups each a part of it. And then you have them really work with that singular part, and then they come back to the group and educate everybody, and you put all of those different parts together like a puzzle. For example, if you wanted to have your audiences understand adult learning styles, you could assign each group a learning style, and they discuss the pros and the cons of it and activities related to that learning style. And then they come back to the group, and each one picks somebody who's going to present on it. And so every participant learns a piece, but then comes back to learn the whole concept. That's jigsaw learning. This is something that breakout rooms are great for, because it really allows that back and forth discussion and has people kind of working in groups separately. But it can also be done in chat. So if you didn't have something that had 3 or 4 pieces, and maybe you had 2, or you wanted, you know, interviewing, you may have, okay, I'm going to pair you up. My group A is the first person, you are all the interviewer. Group B, you are all the interviewee. Now you come back and you ask them to share their experiences with the whole, even though they only participated or experienced one side of the learning. So this is something that is especially great for adult learners, because we really like to, as adults, we want to bring in our personal experiences, and we want to talk about stuff and share our thoughts and opinions. Jigsaw learning is a great way to build engagement, and it's something that you can still do online. The next are Energizers. So if most people, go ahead, throw in the chat. Are you familiar with what an Energizer is? Yes, 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 yes. Awesome. Because it's very difficult to explain to somebody what an Energizer is. It's one of those things that you kind of got to see it, right? And that's one thing that a lot of people have indicated to me is that, like, they don't know how to do Energizers in an online environment. You can still do Energizers. And in fact, if you have a training that's more than an hour and a half long, do an Energizer, because it's very hard to stay focused on it's hard to stay focused on a computer for an hour and a half, but much more than that, it's almost impossible. Many Energizers can be adapted to the online environment. So you could do something like, I can open up the grid video of everybody here, and you could ask everybody, you could do almost, in the United States, it's called Simon Says, but you could give us, everybody, we're going to take a second and we're going to play with the reactions. Everybody put up a smiley face. And then everybody puts up a smiley face. Okay, take it down. Everybody put up a thumbs up. And you get people like, okay, yeah, they're playing along, right? Breaks up the monotony. It's still on the computer. There's also, I've seen one done this weekend, although it makes a big mess, is an in-the-room scavenger hunt. So you call out an item, everybody leaves, tries to find it, and you have to hold it up to the camera if you find it, right? These are silly ones, but and you can get more complicated. Find me, the one that was asked for was a DVD, because most people don't have them relevant anymore. We all do streaming services. Or, find me a blue pen. Everybody finds blue pen, right? It's a way that you can still do that. You can also, for many people, you can, especially if you have wireless earbuds, is that you can still stand up, right? You can still push away from the computer, and you could have people do exercises or more kinesthetic movements. You can still engage that piece in an online environment. So, I mean, I'm not wearing dress slacks. I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm wearing jeans. But if I wanted to, I could stand up, and just adjust the camera. You could still do an Energizer and keep your audience engaged that way. And so those are, you still take a moment, because a lot of us use Energizers or these things, these activities. If you do a lot of in-person training, you have your favorites, right? You have your go-to activities and ways of doing that. It kind of goes back to the first piece of learning from the training about being intentional. Think about how your audience is going to engage with it, and see if there is a way to adapt what you like to do, what sort of engagement techniques that you use in person. Can you get your participants to do them online or change them in a way? And will that interaction still cause the same learning that you're looking for, the same reaction? And if so, you can use it in that online environment. So I'm going to move my participants over a little bit. And okay, we already kind of did a breakout room, so I'm going to skip that one. So those are just some tools and methods that you can use. But the other critical point for engagement from an audience is the trainer themselves. So real quick, I'm going to launch another poll here. Oh, this is, I didn't end the first one, but I can do this one. and launch this poll. Do you think the trainer's performance impacts engagement in a training as a participant? Give this a few more seconds for people. Okay, we'll go ahead. Yeah, so yes, right. To be honest, I really didn't think that many of you thought otherwise. It's more to show you how you can use the polling feature in order to launch and get that sort of engagement, right? Everybody votes. You can then share the results of the poll. 19 people voted and said 100% yes, right? So it's true though. Trainers, your performance is what we kind of call it, because it's all encompassing, right? It's encompassing of your voice and your body language and your tone and all of this, so that we call it performance, to separate it from the content or, you know, the tools, the PowerPoint that you're doing. That performance has a great impact on whether or not people are paying attention. We've all been in situations where you had somebody who talks in a monotone and it's really boring and you're falling asleep the whole time. The goal is to not be that person, right? So your voice and your body have a huge impact. And people think that body doesn't matter so much, right? I'm in front of my computer. What are you talking about? Half the time, you know, I'm not seen. They only see shoulders up. But it's not really true. So first of all, let's talk about voice, because that's the one that is most consistent and easily everybody agrees that voice matters. Voice is inclusive of your tone. So do you have a warm tone? Do you sound cold? It's that measure. It's also your inflection. Do you talk in a monotone, or do your sentences go up and down? Do you vary your inflection, stressing different words? Tempo is how fast you're talking. Volume, which is obvious, you know, loud, soft. And then the language that you use. Are you using really formal language? Are you using very, you know, friendly, like conversational language, as well as are you using too big of terms of art or complex language that is going to confuse somebody who's not as familiar with the topic? All of these are functions of your voice, and different trainers can train the exact same PowerPoint, same content with the same activities, and have different impact and different engagement from their audience because of things as simple as this, the way in which they deliver the content. And then articulation, and that's how you form the words that you are saying. So high pitch generally tells your audience that you're really excited about a topic, right? As excitement goes up, your pitch goes up. It's higher tones. And so that's something to be aware of. There are times that you want to be excited and happy and you want your pitch high. There are other times where it's not appropriate. And so maybe you want to lower your pitch. Maybe you're talking about something more serious or somber, right? You don't want that dissonance in your audience's mind. Because when we get that dissonance, we check out. We don't pay attention as much. We also need to make sure that we are conscious of our speed of delivery. Are you talking so fast that your audience doesn't understand you? Are you talking so slow that they're bored? We also unconsciously think that a very high speed of delivery implies high levels of anxiety as well. And so it's kind of walking that line between being excited and jazzed and like, yeah, I'm about a topic, versus sounding not very confident, because when we don't sound confident, audiences don't believe us. And again, it becomes uncomfortable as a participant, and it leads to disengagement there as well. And then intensity, volume meets enthusiasm, kind of the same thing. If you get really loud and you're really high energy, it can be it can almost be too much and be a turn off. You want to be somewhere in the middle, right? That sweet spot of sounding enthused, but not scaring people. And then body language. This is the one that I find most important in online training, weirdly enough. I mean, I think that we all kind of take for granted our voice and we understand that part, but body language is sort of the one that no one talks about. And first is facial expressions. So when we're in person, you're being read all the way, right? From this way your shoulders are and your knees, your way your body's positioned towards somebody. And we read facial expressions. However, on online, especially with the camera, a lot of times facial expressions is where the primary thing that your audience sees. So are you smiling? Are you, some of us, I know for me, for example, when I'm really thinking about something or I'm reading, I'm like real serious about it, I get this really terrible, mean looking face and I look angry at everybody. And it's not, it's that I'm concentrating on what I'm reading. But those types of things we don't necessarily think about. And when your audience only has this much information, that becomes what is prominent becomes right. They can't see that the rest where your shoulders are relaxed or something like that. So being cognizant of our facial expressions becomes really important. The next is eye contact. And so making sure that when you're talking to somebody that you're looking right into the camera. It's weird because if I'm over here and you'll notice to me, my eye contact is on the side, but what it is I have all of your participant videos up. So I'm actually kind of looking at each one and everyone's video here to get some of that feedback that you would normally get just by looking out into the audience. For me, it's to the side here. But especially in one-on-one conversations, or if you want to be seen as being very earnest, you need to look into the camera because then it looks more from the participant view that you're looking at them. But make sure that you don't spend the whole time like looking off site or looking at your notes down here. It's really distracting, right? So try to keep eye contact still with your audience, even though it's an online environment. Smile, we kind of already covered that with facial expressions. But body position. So this is twofold. One, it's weird to talk to somebody when they're like this. Like it's just, it's unnatural to us, especially from when we're expecting a speaker. But, kind of being squared to the camera here. The other thing to recognize is that body position also affects your voice and tone, right? If you're slouched like this, your diaphragm in your stomach is all compressed and you're not able to project as clearly. Sitting up and sitting straight actually makes you sound better and makes your tone of voice better. If your desk is too low, this is the great thing. You're online, put some books under your computer to make it sit up. Nobody can see it but you. You can make yourself your own little podium, right? And you can set your body position to be whatever you want it to be. Posture is a function of that as well. Again, it affects the way in which you sound and you can project. And then hand gestures. So you have to recognize that, you can see yourself on camera. You can still use hand gestures. They just have to be like shoulder level, right? I've been counting stuff out. I still gesture here. Provides a little bit of movement. It's not as stiff. It's more natural, and that is actually more engaging. And so there'll be times that I lean forward when I really want to focus on a point or feel or like I'm really talking to you all, versus stepping back when it's more, addressing everybody or a larger concept. But body language, hand gestures are still important. They just are different than you would normally do online or in person. And then movement. Again, you don't have to sit 100% still. Obviously, though, you have a frame that you can move amongst. If I was suddenly like darting off camera, that would be really distracting as well. And so you don't want to move too much. Kind of, again, stay in your little box, keep track of where you are on the camera. And then, so we talked about ways of building engagement, but it doesn't do you any good to use a bunch of tools, build a bunch of engagement, really focus on your performance, and then do things that cause your audience to become disengaged, right? So again, it's all about keeping your audience in mind. It's being understanding to what they're experiencing. And one easy way to kind of keep your audiences in mind is that you can't see it, but I have your participant pictures up, like I said, on the video. And every once in a while I'm talking, I scroll through, because then I'm getting that feedback from people of like, okay, they look like they are with me, or getting a lot of really quizzical, confused faces. Maybe I should cover that back again, something like that. It's important to keep the audience in mind, engage their engagement level or their reactions, one of which is by going through the videos. The next is to share your expectations. And so Peter did this really well at the beginning, right? He said, okay, this is how we're going to handle questions. It's okay to have your video on. If you are expecting your participants to interact a lot, telling them up front will allow them to anticipate and say, okay, yep, I know I'm going to be expected to interact, and so I'm going to pay attention, or engage a little bit more here or there, right? Sharing expectations, especially for adult learners, becomes more critical. They are more likely to disengage if they are surprised with something that they didn't know. You also need to share your approach. Like, if you particularly want to take questions and answers at the end, or you say that there are specific times in which you're going to want people to discuss or chat amongst themselves, just ask them. I know that it's not something that bothers me, but certain trainers, like, it becomes distracting if the chat box is coming up all the different times while they're talking. So they'll say, hold all the chat until the end of the module and we'll do it there, right? Or a break or whatever. So just being transparent there can also increase engagement, because they know what to expect. Tell them where the mute button lives. I've signed off of meetings before when participants don't know where the mute button lives, or the trainer's not doing a good job of muting. And then all of a sudden, all you can hear is everybody's background noise, or the dog barking, or the dishwasher running, or whatever. At that point, it's so much distraction that your participants can't focus on the content that you're teaching, right? So tell your participants where the mute button lives. Share expectations, maybe that everybody should be muted during the content, and then everybody's going to unmute to talk, right? Whatever you want as a trainer, but make sure that your participants' experience they're the primary, and if they can't hear you, that's a problem. Use reaction chat and polls to gauge engagement. So what I mean by this is, when I launch a poll, it tells me how many of you answer, right? It tells me what percentage. So I know that I got 20 out of 24 participants answered the poll last time. Okay, that's still good. You may not have every single person engage with every single thing, but if you're only getting, you asked for somebody to answer in the chat and you're only getting 2 answers and you have 24 participants, okay, your participants are probably disengaged. What can you do? Maybe it's time to introduce a break or an energizer or something like that, right? It's not about what their answers are as much in this instance as how many answers are you getting. Same thing with reactions, right? Everybody throw up a thumbs up sign and only a few do it. Okay, you have a problem. If the majority are, okay, you're good, right? But on the inverse, you can ask for real-time feedback. This is, if you are with me, put up a thumbs up, and then if some people don't, maybe you private chat them. Is there something, did I go too fast? Do we need to recover something? You know, something like that. This is where the actual answers to the feedback matter, and when that's what you're looking for, not just the number of people providing feedback. Does that distinction make sense to people? Not, or is some sort of visual sign that you understand? Okay, yeah, there's different, it depends on what your goal is, right? And ways to do it. And then you need to give breaks, same as person. If this was more than an hour and a half, like I said, there would be a break. You have to give people a chance to just move away from the computer for a second. The other is the ability to process the information already. How do you have time for private feedback? So it depends on what kind of feedback that you're looking for, like how in depth that you want to do. So if it's something that you are just looking like, is everybody with me? That's a few seconds, right, to get that sort of feedback. In a longer training, or if it was more, if it wasn't just like best practices, if we were really trying to explore a real concept or something, you may open up time during the working time. When you go to breakout rooms, as a host, I can jump from breakout room to breakout room. That might be a good time to solicit feedback because it's in a smaller group setting. Is everybody doing well? You got anything? You know, do you have any questions? Anything I can help with? Also in longer trainings, I would really tell people that at module breaks, take a second and ask everybody, do you have any questions before we move on? Stuff like that. Those are the best places to build in those feedback points. But breaks, right? You can also ask, you know, hey, we're going to take a 10-minute break. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat and we'll cover them when we come back, before we start again. That's a great place to get feedback as well. Also gives people a chance to walk away, shake it out, you know, stand up, get away from the computer for a moment. It's going backwards. And then finally, the best tip that I can give you at the end of the day when it comes to engagement is positivity. Be positive and be human. When something goes wrong, people understand it, right? It's almost like slightly endearing in a weird way. We want to engage with other human beings. And so when you know, when the slide goes backwards instead of forwards, it's not a big deal. You say oops and move forward. People look for authenticity. We like to, that's how we build rapport with other people. And so don't get so self-conscious on these things that you're not having fun, that you're not, you know, you're building that interaction with your audience there. So be kind to yourself, be positive, be human. Your audience will respond to it a lot better than they would the opposite. So thank you. That's all I have in terms of content. This is some of my information. Really, this is just the slide that always goes at the end. So it's more important that if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I always find in situations like this that I leave and I continue thinking about it. And while I have time for a few questions now, I really get questions 3 days later. So if you are like that as well, you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to send me a private message, additional questions, looking for more resources. I love to knowledge share, especially with other trainers. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to stop sharing here. And it's 3:21, so we have a few minutes. If you all want to unmute, you can feel free to ask any questions that you may have, or throw them in the chat. Hello, sir.
Oh, should we ask the question or just in the chat?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Ask your question.
I have sort of 3 questions. What is the most suitable group size to work with?
I think it depends on the content, right? So if it is something that is very interaction heavy, so for example, if you are trying to do a working public speaking seminar and you want your participants to actually do mini speeches, I would say pretty small, right? Like 10. If you are doing sort of in the middle, right? You want to do, I don't know, a networking training, or even something like this. I think that this is a great group size. So you can go 20 to 30. If you start going higher than that, it needs to be far more lecture style. You're probably looking at a webinar, or you need somebody else to operate the chat, anything at the 60-person mark. And just know that for time, because it's really about timing, right? If you could have everybody sit in front of the computer forever and ever and ever, well, you could do as many activities as you wanted, but everybody's going to quit on you if you do that. So it's really, it's kind of laying that out. Did you have more questions, or?
Yeah, just fast forward. What is your experience with Google Meet? And the last one, how do you see the way of providing trainings after COVID?
So Google Meet, what's nice about it is it's really convenient. It's low barriers to access. A lot of people have Google accounts. It's pretty standard. It's free, and it doesn't have some of the paid wall limitations. I do find that sometimes the connection is difficult. So I like using it more for small group meetings with 3 or 4. And then I use stuff like Zoom for actual trainings. That's my experience with it because of the tech side. But some people love it. And then in terms of how do I think trainings are going to go after COVID, I think that they're going to become much more of a hybrid. I don't think that online training is going to go away. The ease and convenience and the flexibility of online training is just too much to ignore. However, I do think that there are certain topics and stuff that is much more impactful in person. And I do think that people get a different type of learning from in-person training events. That engagement and rapport, that relationship building one-on-one is just really important to people. And while we can replicate it here, we don't truly replace it. So I think it's going to be a mix of both, truly. I hope that answered your question. And then, is there a specific time to conduct the session for best results? It really depends on who your audience is and what the topic is. It's very difficult to do things right after lunch. So most people have a period of hour or 2 right after lunch where we're tired, we just ate, we zone out. Right after work also becomes very difficult for that same sort of reason. We've just taken off our work hat. We don't necessarily want to sit down. You need a breather. Other than that, it really depends on your audience and the demographics there. You know, you don't want to compete with, if your audience has, kids, trying to schedule something at a very standard like bedtime, you're not going to get much engagement, right? It really depends on your audience at that point. Anything else? Awesome. Thank you very much to everybody for participating. Like I said, if you come up with questions later, just let me know. And then other than that, I think I'm all set.
Maybe another one.
Okay.
So talking about breakout rooms, is there some more optimized number of participants? For example, 8 is too much, 4 maybe too little.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you want the breakout room to accomplish, right? So I've seen them used really effectively for speed networking. where there's only 2 people in each room, right? But they're only in there for 5 minutes, and then you reshuffle them, and then you reshuffle them, because it's really given everybody an opportunity to meet a lot of people. To use them for group discussion, I think personally that 4 to 6 number is pretty good. It allows everybody a chance to talk, but you're not taking turns all the way around. Same for working group sessions, although I've seen some group sessions work better with a higher number, because as we all know, a lot of times when you ask for group work, you have some participants that take the lead and some that take a more passive role. Sometimes having 8 to 10 can be a good number for that as well. It's, again, I feel like I say this a lot, that everything is so context specific, but think of how many people you would want working in an in-person training in a group, and that's a nice guide as well, just for breakout rooms.
Okay, then one more. You mentioned passive participants. So how do you usually deal with those?
So I try to think about why they are being passive participants, right? And if it is something that you as a trainer can do to engage them, because there's certain things that you can't control, right? So if your participant is being passive for their own, like I've seen one, for example, I was doing a training, and like I said, timing wise, I had a mom who was taking care of a very small child at the same time as participating. It's very difficult for her to type in the chat when she's holding like a squirmy baby or whatever. I was just excited that she thought the topic was enough that she still tried to engage even while holding a squirmy baby. I knew that there was nothing that I was really going to be able to do to get high levels engagement in chat. That distraction is just natural. So I did try to, ask for more of like, nod your head if you agree, or, ask for that verbal stuff, because she could do it with her arms being used to hold a baby. Other times it may be a question of maybe they're just more introverted and they don't feel comfortable talking on camera. So a mix of asking for verbal as well as giving the option to put it in the chat might make it so that some people who are more comfortable participate there. The other thing that I've done is I've kept track before in engagement rooms or in breakout rooms of who's kind of taking the lead. And then if there are a bunch of people that are being passive, maybe I'll assign them a breakout room together. So at least somebody in that group has to, kind of take a lead too. But in a way that doesn't really call them out or anything, makes them more uncomfortable, right? So those are just some tools that have worked for me in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Michelle, I don't think we have more questions. At least they're not there yet, but maybe they will come up. I want to thank you personally for having your lunchtime dedicating to a training of us. So thank you very much. And I also thank all the participants. We have also the 16th and the 21st of May, very interesting speakers. One on the 16th is Saturday. She's from Hong Kong, but she's actually from Russia. She will talk about leadership in times of crisis. She is an inspiring female entrepreneur. She studied Chinese in 1 year. So, and she is a media expert for the West and for China companies. And the 21st of May, we have Energy is Everything, because you can give trainings, but if you don't are energized yourself as a trainer, it's difficult to get your trainees energized. And that will be Simon Alexander, very famous in JCI world speaker, and he will energize you. Maybe you get energized or get tips how to energize people. So thank you very much. We of the team JCI Change Your Game, thank you also for participating, and see you next time, and have a nice morning, midday, and evening. And of course, I see Ruiz. Let's have a group up together. 1, 2, 3, all together. Yes, thank you. It's all recorded. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice
Yep.
day and morning. Bye.
Thanks,
Okay,
Peter.
bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.